what is a White House Fellow?
It was a program that was established back by President Johnson. So we're going back into the early 60s now. And the goal was to take a relatively small number. So the classes have ranged. My class was 12. The average is probably closer to 15. 15 individuals who in theory have been successful at the midpoint in their career, and then give them the opportunity to see the highest levels of government and work in the highest levels of government to hopefully improve them as a leader that will contribute either public or private sector going forward. There's usually some business people. There's usually people from medical. It's a very diverse kind of background, and military officers too. So some of the most significant military officers have come out of it. And there's really two pieces to it. There's the work. You're assigned to a cabinet level officer. So in my case, I worked in the office of the Secretary of Treasury and worked directly for the Deputy Secretary of Treasury. I was kind of his executive assistant. In other cases, there was a woman that was in my class. She worked very closely with the director of NASA. One person was in the CIA, kind of a whole variety. One person worked in the office of the vice president. So they kind of spread around different opportunities. I was fortunate because I worked both at Secretary of Treasury, but then I also worked in what they called the Office of Policy Development, which is a fancy title, but it was the gentleman that reports to the president that's in charge of crafting domestic policy. And that's kind of half of it. The other half is an education program. So we would meet probably on average 3 times a week for lunch, just the fellows. And you'd have somebody join us. So a given week, which would not be out of the ordinary, would be the Secretary of State, CBS White House correspondent, and a Supreme Court justice.
Every week.
Every week. And it was fascinating conversations. There usually were no speeches or anything. It was over lunch. And it was basically a chance to ask questions. I love asking questions. So of the 12 of us, I probably asked more questions than anybody else. But it was a great opportunity. And then part of that, there were travels. So we actually did travel to the East Coast that focused largely on urban development. So going to Atlantic City, seeing what they were trying to do, meeting with the mayor who claimed that he was a good guy and he was in prison 6 months later, which is kind of the standard in Atlantic City. We were in California, met with the governor. That was most focused on agriculture. And then I had never been in the military. And so, as I referenced earlier, spent a couple days on a aircraft carrier in the middle of the Atlantic. Went down on some on some subs, nuclear subs, both attack and boomers, the missile subs. Again, never been on those. The security clearance I had, I could go unescorted. So I could literally go into the nuke room and walk around. So fascinating things that you'd never recreate. We were in North Carolina and went off at 2 a.m. while the paratroopers were flying out the back of the plane. I did not fly out the back of the plane. I actually landed. But experiences that you wouldn't do, and then did international trips, and the one that I referenced earlier in Warsaw. So it was a phenomenal experience. And again, just really fortunate to have been selected. They selected 12 people my year out of thousands of applications and things like that. And I was just very fortunate. And I had a gentleman who was the managing director of my office at McKinsey, and he was very supportive, and it worked out. So that's the program. It was a phenomenal program. It was funny because when I was at McKinsey, I had been very fortunate. It had gone very well. And the gentleman I referenced, the managing director, the chances of being selected for the program are really, really low. But I had some folks that had been involved in it that were in my graduate class at Harvard. Elaine Chow was one of them. And so I'd seen that, and that kind of looked interesting. Again, it kind of checked the box for some exposure to the public sector, but I didn't have to spend 10 years and got great exposure. So he was very supportive and did it. And the deal was that nobody would know about it, largely because the chance of being selected low. And the last thing I want to do is all these people tracing your office, say, oh, it's too bad you didn't get it, and that sort of thing. So anyway, but the deal was once you got to a certain level, kind of they do several cuts, and there's a regional level where they narrow it down to 144, I think it was. Then given client relationships and that, then we've got to start thinking about it at least. And as it turned out, I found out about that, and that ended up going into the office the next day, and he wasn't there, unfortunately. And I got a call from the receptionist and said, there are 2 federal agents out here, and they've got a list of people that they want to talk to. And so I had to run around the office to the partners and others explaining that I really wasn't under indictment, that this is what the deal was. This was actually good. It made for an interesting morning. That's the program. It was terrific. I chose to go to Treasury. I had an opportunity to do a couple different things. I had an interview at FBI. It was 90 minutes. There was only 2 people in the room. One was the director of the FBI, Judge Webster, and his number 2 guy. He never said a thing the whole time. It was all Webster and I going back and forth. I went over to defense, and the gentleman who interviewed me there was the military liaison to Casper Weinberger. He had 3 stars. A guy by the name of Colin Powell, who you probably have heard of since.
Never heard.
And so it was opportunities like that. And to your point, great things you don't do, but come back to help you in different ways. So then I got into the mayor's race. So funny story, I'll tell you this. So I called Colin Powell. And at that point, of course, he was no longer a 3-star. He had been a lot of different things, including Secretary of State. And I called him and said, I'd love to have your support, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was in this campaign, and he said, well, given my positions, I can't endorse candidates, but here's what I'll do. I'll send you a check. And what you do is when you file your report, put my name at the top. And so sure enough, that's what we did. And of course, the morning news, as soon as they got that, Colin Powell, that was the story. So it was actually better than an endorsement.